Welcome to the Barbercast podcast. I am your host, Naomi K. Thank you for listening. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah-Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. Sharing childhood memories with my husband is one of our most favorite things to do when we get a little time alone to ourselves. We can go for hours chatting about the joys, comedic moments, misfortunes, and dysfunctions concerning our upbringings. Sometimes we laugh until we cry, and other times we marvel at our resilience in making it through some tough times as kids. However, the memories that make us smile the most are those where we know it was nobody but the divine hand of God that stepped in and made the impossible possible. One of our most recent trips down memory lane took me back to the memory of the Big Mac. I love the ocean, and so do most of the members of my family. And when I was a little girl, my mom used to take us to the beach a lot, and there was never a time when she had to twist our arms to go either. Whenever she mentioned the word beach, we would drop everything, including video games and friends, so that we can go take a dip in the surf. To make those impromptu beach trips more memorable, on the way home from the beach, my mom would either stop by one of the old-fashioned ice cream parlors and buy us some 49-cent ice cream cones, or she would pull into a McDonald's drive-thru and buy us some 99-cent Big Macs and fries. Yes, Big Macs were once 99 cents, and I know that's hard to believe now with the way inflation is, but once upon a time, you could go into a McDonald's and buy a Big Mac for 99 cents. Anyways, my mom was cool like that. Well, one evening after spending the day hanging out together, me, my sister, and a friend wanted to go to the beach, so we asked my mom if she would take us. Well, of course, my mom is always down to spend an evening by the water, so she obliged and said yes. But immediately after saying yes, she let us know that she didn't have any extra money, so we would have to come straight home after the beach. That meant not making a stop by McDonald's to get some Big Macs or stopping to get some ice cream either, which was one of our favorite things to do after going to the beach in the evenings. We felt a little disappointed about not being able to make a stop for Big Macs or ice cream afterwards, but we decided to go anyway. All of us loaded into the Blue Goose, which was our old family hoopty. And if you don't know, a hoopty is urbanly defined as an older model vehicle with some missing framework. Basically, it's a car that's running, but it's hanging on by a wing and a prayer. We arrived at the beach and did what we always do. We kicked our shoes off and went sprinting towards the water like our bathing suits were on fire. And if you were ever there to see our excitement every time we got to the beach, you would have thought that it was our first trip by the way we were overzealously running and diving into the shallow water. But we didn't care because the breeze was perfect and we were carefree in that moment, splashing around in the shallow like fish fresh out of water. We were having tons of innocent fun. And as we were kind of frolicking in the water and doing handstands and back floats, my sister just started screaming, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And if you know my sister, you know when she starts screaming, "Oh my God," like that, something big is about to happen or is happening. In our case, that scream meant a giant shark just surfaced, a comet was about to land in the water, or a pot of gold was floating on the water. Something like that was happening. But I looked over at my sister and she was swimming towards what she was screaming about. When she finally got what she was screaming about in her hands, she turned around to show us. It wasn't a comet and it wasn't a shark, but it was sure close to a pot of gold. It was $20, a $20 bill floating across the water. My sister grabbed that $20 out of the water like she grabbed a bank bag full of money and went running towards the shore to show my mom. And of course, my mom celebrated, and we all went into celebration because that's just what we did as a family. When something good happened to one of us, we all started jumping and shouting like the Lord just answered everybody's prayer at one time. Well, at the time she found the money, the sun was setting in. It was time for us to leave. So we loaded back into the car, and everyone was kind of awkwardly awaiting the fate of this $20 bill. My sister broke the silence by asking my mom, "Hey, Ma, can we go to McDonald's now?" She said yes and drove us straight to the drive-thru. Now, I've had plenty of Big Macs before that night, but the one I ate that night was the best Big Mac I'd ever had in my life. And let me share with you why. This memory reminds me of a passage in Genesis 22. It talks about how God instructed Abraham to take his son Isaac to Moriah and offer him up as a burnt offering upon one of the mountains. Abraham didn't ask God any questions. Instead, he gathered some wood for the offering, his son, and 2 helpers, and headed toward the mountains to offer his son up to the Lord. It takes about 3 days for them to get to Moriah, and when Abraham sees the mountains afar off, he leaves the 2 helpers behind and takes Isaac along with him. Now, Isaac becomes curious because he knows that they're going to offer a sacrifice to the Lord, but he doesn't see a lamb in his father's hands. And when he questions his father about it, Abraham kind of gives him a sideways answer about God providing one when they get there. To shorten the story a bit, Abraham and Isaac arrive at the place for the sacrifice. Immediately, Abraham builds the altar, lays the wood in order, then ties Isaac to the altar. Now, the Bible doesn't record Isaac's response this way, but I'm sure he was apprehensive, tugging away from his father and looking at him as if he'd lost his mind. Isaac was probably crying out to God for him to save him as well. However, just as Abraham was about to knife Isaac, an angel of the Lord called out to him to stop him from sacrificing his son. The angel tells Abraham not to go forward with the sacrifice, and he also tells him that his obedience to sacrifice something that meant the world to him showed that he feared God. Now, the word fear in this passage doesn't necessarily mean Abraham was literally afraid of God. It means reverence and respect. Abraham was in worship with God. He had a relationship with God that provoked him to honor and trust any request that God gave him. And because of Abraham's worship, God rewarded him. The Bible goes on to say that after God expressed his pleasure with Abraham through his angel, Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the thicket by his horns and offered it up as a sacrifice instead of his son. He then named that place Jehovah Jireh, which means the Lord will provide. I've said what I'm about to say before, and I'll say it again. God cares about every aspect of your life. And I'm repeating this because I went through a season in my life where I misunderstood how to approach God with my needs. In that season, I wasn't in worship with him. I was saved, but I wasn't in worship with him. And what I mean by that is I wasn't in a relationship with the Father. So instead of him being my God, he was the God that I prayed to. He was this big God that didn't waste his time with menial things, but in fact, he does just the opposite. God serves our little needs with just as much pleasure as he does our greater needs. He also prides himself on being the God who gives us the desires of our hearts. How does God become the Jehovah Jireh in your life? Worship. Worship isn't just an expression of reverence and adoration as defined. It's almost like a romantic spiritual collision between you and God. And the fundamental truth about worship is that when we delight in God, he delights in blessing us. When we find satisfaction in God through faith, it pleases him. Now, how does that understanding equate to you getting your needs met? It's simple. Pleasure in any relationship doesn't come without reward. That's just the way God designed worship. When we please him, He releases what's waiting in the window of heaven to us. He pours it on us. My book knowledge of God developed into a relationship because through faith, God went from being a God in my life to my Emmanuel, the God with me, the Savior who sacrificed his life for me and desires to be intimately involved in every aspect of my life. He's Emmanuel, expressed as agape love when I feel hopeless. He's Emmanuel, expressed as shalom when I need peace. And he's Emmanuel, expressed as Jireh when I need provision, just as he was with Abraham on the mountain with Isaac and with my sister and me that night at the beach. It pleased God to provide a ram for Abraham, just like it pleased him to send a $20 bill floating across the Gulf of Mexico so me and my sister could have a Big Mac. Being in worship with God is the only way to experience true pleasure in this life. It's an experience where you trust God enough to participate in an exchange with him, where he expresses his sacrificial love for you in ways beyond your understanding. He becomes your Emmanuel, the God who sacrificed a part of himself to become a part of your life. All of your needs are met in worship. Thank you for listening.